Chapter 16. A fireball sped towards Abigail, who had a matter of seconds to react. Abigail rolled out of the way and could feel the heat of the flames as they kissed the ground where she once stood. Apparently, the calm discussion had escalated into a battle. Abigail crouched, readied herself to evade another attack, and the phoenix jumped off into the air, using its ability of flight to its advantage. The phoenix circled overhead, Abigail keeping a close eye on it. The bird dove, and it unleashed a series of fireball attacks, none of which were aimed directly at Abigail. Knowing she was not in immediate danger, Abigail cautiously watched where the projectile struck, wondering if perhaps the phoenix was trying to eliminate her possible escape routes. Abigail decided that her chances of survival were slim if she kept up with her current plan of standing in one spot, waiting for the bird to pick her off. So, Abigail decided to initiate a chase. Abigail ran through what were once glorious streets of a historic city, hopping debris and fallen buildings along the way. Although Abigail had always been physically active and an avid bike rider, she was surprised at her own stamina and agility at the moment. She felt fantastic, and she was moving with such speed and grace. Abigail glanced back quickly to see where her fiery stalker was, and to her surprise, it was swooping in silently right behind her. Abigail ducked to avoid getting impaled by its beak. In her abrupt motion, Abigail stumbled and began rolling into the charred remains of a truck. Abigail extended her arm out to block herself from striking the truck, and as she touched the vehicle, it propelled down the street. Confused at what she just saw and thinking that she may have caused the impact, Abigail decided to test if she could replicate the results. She ran over to a blackened car and gripped the location where the passenger side door once hung. Abigail tensed her shoulder and pulled back on the car with all her might. The car budged. Perhaps the mystic empowered her more than she had realized, Abigail thought. Then, that would mean that she may be capable of fighting the phoenix. She dragged the car a few feet and waited for the phoenix to close in on her. The bird acted as Abigail suspected. It honed in on her and prepared itself to dive. It grew closer, and Abigail stood her ground patiently. When the attacker was within spitting distance, Abigail spun around with the car in her hand and hurled it into the phoenix. The car flew from her fingertips and collided with the bird. The phoenix was knocked to the ground and landed in a fiery plume. The phoenix shook off the attack, enraged, and charged Abigail for a ground attack. Abigail turned back to her strategy of running, and a second chase ensued. Abigail marveled at her swiftness, easily navigating her way through the wreckage of the former Philadelphia. Abigail quickly breezed by a car and rapidly picked it up and heaved it over her head. The car struck the phoenix with exact precision, and the creature once again toppled to the ground. The bird let out a horrendous scream, intended to intimidate Abigail, but Abigail was too energized with her new abilities to let anything get to her. Abigail continued her sprint and knew that throwing blunt objects at the mighty beast would not destroy it. She needed a plan. What would extinguish it, Abigail contemplated, and came up with the idea of luring it into some sort of wind tunnel. Abigail continued her run, maintaining a speed just fast enough to keep the phoenix on her heels, but preventing it from reaching her. Every quarter of a mile or so, the bird would churn out a fireball, which Abigail was now able to dodge with ease. Abigail led the bird, which followed obediently, to the Market Street tunnel. Abigail ducked inside, hoping that there would be enough wind flowing through the tunnel to test her hypothesis. The wind was blowing strong, but had little effect on the phoenix as it flew in after Abigail. Abigail exited the tunnel, hoping to formulate a new plan of attack, but she must have lost a step as the phoenix was able to extend its beak and clamp down on Abigail's thigh. Her momentum, combined with the abrupt stop, jettisoned Abigail's whole body into a nearby brick building. Abigail struck the building, and it collapsed on top of her. Dazed by the collision, Abigail groggily began to push rubble off of herself. During the cleanup, the phoenix too clawed at the rubble atop of Abigail, trying to free her to continue the fight. Once skin became visible, the bird backed off and breathed fire into what was left of the building. Abigail cried out in pain as her shoulder seared before her. Rejuvenated by the pain, Abigail was able to break free from the remainder of the ruins and burst free with a leap into the air. Abigail landed as she set her sights on the lamppost near the brooding inferno. Abigail took a running start and lunged at the lamppost, gripping it to use it as leverage to swing about. She released herself from her acrobatic display and jutted herself, foot first, into the face of the phoenix. The bird's head jerked back from the kick, and Abigail sailed safely by, landing behind on her feet. Not allowing the bird any time to recuperate, Abigail returned to the lamppost and plucked it from the ground as easily as a child picks a dandelion. She spun the dim weapon above her, and it crashed down on the back of the bird. The glass bulb shattered on contact, sprinkling shards of glass across the street in an orchestra of delicate chatter. The phoenix let out a cry of pain, followed by a roar. The bird did not stay down long enough to avoid enduring more beatings, so it returned to the sky, where it would once again have the upper hand. Abigail nodded approvingly to herself at the thought that her efforts appeared to be working. She must continue before future injuries, which she knew she would obtain, would slow her stroll. Back to the attempt to extinguish the flames, Abigail thought perhaps dousing it with water would work. Where to find that much water in a city? A water tower would definitely work, but she would have to lead the phoenix out of the city until she was able to find one. Abigail luckily knew she could easily spot a tower from the distance, so she restarted her cat and mouse game. Abigail ran quick enough for the chase to be competitive without allowing any margin of error where the phoenix would be able to take another bite. The dash went on for miles. Abigail was hoping that her new energy would be able to endure until she could finish off her plan. She soon saw a water tower on the horizon and adjusted her headings accordingly. She made it to the tower, but was faced with a challenge: how to transfer the water from the tank to the phoenix. Abigail concluded that knocking the tank onto the phoenix would be the most effective method to try to snuff the fire beast, but was now faced with the challenge of enacting it. The phoenix snipped at Abigail as she danced around the legs of the tower, weaving in and out for safety. Abigail jumped up in a mighty bound and pulled one of the support bars from the structure. The metal pole, measuring about 10 feet in length, became Abigail's new weapon. Abigail needed to make sure that the bird was immobile for her to be capable of crushing it with the water tank, so she went on the offensive. Abigail dove at the creature, landing a forceful hit with her metal staff. Abigail was fortunate enough to have hit the wing of the bird, which, if done repeatedly, could strip the phoenix of its flight. Abigail unleashed a barrage of blows against the bird, which was unable to rally up enough speed to skirt the attacks as Abigail ran circles around it. Abigail then turned her attacks from its wings to its legs, bringing it from a vertical stance to a horizontal lay. The bird was beginning to become stationary. In order to keep up with the assault, Abigail needed to remain in striking distance, which, unfortunate for her, was resulting in painful burns across her hands and arms. She jumped in the air to deliver one final blow before attempting her crushing plan. She landed pole first, impaling the phoenix through the side. The pole drove into the ground, creating a temporary trap. A trap which would hopefully withstand the few minutes Abigail needed. Abigail released her weapon and ran towards the tower. She began scaling the metal legs. She climbed quickly, hearing the shrieks echoing from below. She stood atop the tower, peering down at the struggling phoenix. She had one shot. She bent at the knees and pushed on the side of the tank. She could hear the screeching of tearing metal, which meant it was working. She managed to push the tank over onto the well-calculated area that contained the phoenix. The tank plummeted on top of the fiery bird, splashing a sea of water over the field where it lay. Abigail watched from above as a wall of steam rose out of the dust. Hoping that was the end of the battle, Abigail descended to check on the vitality status of her opponent. A lifeless wing extended from under the metal remains. A wing that was once full of powerful flames was now just a dull wing of regular feathers. Abigail leaned in and pulled a large piece of metal from the pile. Looking in to find the bird's head, she uncovered an eye, which just stared as if stuck in a gaze. It remained motionless and dead. Abigail felt a wave of relief. She did not allow herself to be caught off guard and continued to uncover the phoenix to be absolutely certain it was finished. The fate of the world depended on her being thorough. She exposed the head and just stared at it. It was a magnificent beast, with majestic feathers and a regal aura. And too bad it had to come to this, she thought. As she was reflecting, the head snapped back to attention and unleashed a cry that startled Abigail. The bird opened its beak and unleashed a stream of fire that engulfed Abigail. Abigail fell to the ground, trying to put the flames out. She could feel her earrings melting to her ears. She could smell herself cooking. She had never imagined such pain. She was able to put herself out while the phoenix rose from the rubble and reignited. Abigail stood with all the energy she had left and prepared herself again in a defensive stance. As Abigail welcomed another attack, she could not help but notice the burning sensations in her fingers, like she was burning from the inside. She placed her hands in front of her face, and each of her fingers gave off an orange glow. She watched as flames protruded out of her fingers. Then, all at once, her fingers exploded before her. She fell to her knees and curled up in a ball as her whole body was consumed in an orange glow. Her skin split down her back, and a geyser of fire shot out of her body.